Hello and welcome back to this damn full idealistic crusade. This video is a review and a detailing of the absolutely amazing 3 CD complete score reissue of Ennio Morricone's iconic The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly score. This is from Quartet Records. It was released late last year in 2020 and makes a perfect pairing with the brand new 2021 Kino Lorber 4K and Blu-ray release of the 1967 International Theatrical Cut. And just like this release, the new quartet release of the score not only fixes a lot of wrongs, and not only finally gives us the complete presentation for the first time ever, plus a wealth of bonus tracks, but where the Kino release still has maybe some room for improvement, we still could use a brand new master and try to recreate the Italian cut of the film perfectly. There are things that can be done to improve on this already impressive release. But with this quartet release, I don't see there's any room for improvement. This thing is a dream for soundtrack collectors, for Morricone fans, and for Leone fans. And as soon as it was released, when I saw who it was from and that it was Chris Malone in charge of this release and producing it and in charge of the technical aspects, I knew this would be impressive. But until finally getting in my hands just recently and going through it, again, paired with going through the new Kino release, they make a perfect pairing, by the way. I am still just absolutely gobsmacked at how amazing this release is. So again, I'll show you the rear, which should tell you just how much material is on here. Again, it is 3 CDs. The first 2 CDs are the complete score plus tons of bonus tracks and alternates. And then disc 3 is a recreation of the original 1967 stereo LP from United Artists. But most importantly, it does restore 1 or 2 places where the tracks were edited, so they actually run their complete length. They were slightly edited on the original release, which is very annoying when you try to listen to it because you can tell those edits are there. And the stereo LP is important because it is generally thought of to be a separately composed version. Morricone combined some cues and things, and it does seem like an alternate recording, and it is in stereo. Some people have theorized that maybe it's an earlier version of some of the tracks, or that some tracks are merely different mixes of what we have in the film. But it is a distinct thing in and of itself, so it's very important to still include with the complete score, as a lot of scores in the 60s and into the 70s, the LP version would have been compiled by either the label or the composer, hopefully, and is usually a separate recording. Now, what is important to note about this release is while the album version on disc 3 is stereo, everything else is pretty much mono. That's what was discovered in the vaults. That's what they had access to, and that is what is known about the recording, that apparently the actual film score recording was mono, and then the album scoring was recorded stereo. Again, there is a debate going on. There's a really great thread on the Film Score monthly page for this release in their forums, which I will link to in the description below, where even Chris Malone pops in and chimes in with relevant information. And he, as usual, did as extensive a search as possible. And then the score restoration is done in chronological order with the film, which is fantastic. There's also a lot of tracks that didn't make it into the film. And some tracks on this release, when you listen to them, it's interesting to try and figure out maybe what that would have been for. There is one track in particular that I really think is probably what would have played under the famous cut Socorro sequence, which is now lost outside of stills. There's extra music for the desert scenes, which of course were extended in the Italian version and by MGM in their 2003 edit, but there's even more additional music that Morricone composed besides that. You will have to deal with the track titles being in Italian. That is how it is on most releases already, but some fans have gone to the trouble of making English translations. Again, somebody posted that on that Film Score monthly thread, which I will link to in the description. But this is an absolutely stacked release. We've never gotten anything this comprehensive. There was a 2001 CD release from Capitol Records here in the U.S. It did put some extensions onto the 1967 LP version. but unfortunately, it was nowhere near complete, and it did have some issues of its own sonically. So that was unfortunately compromised. But that was the first major extension we got. Then a couple years ago, the GDM label made their own extended version, which went much further than the Capitol version, but it had some different edits on some tracks, and it also was not complete. So I never got to pick that version up. And they also did one of Once Upon a Time in the West, and I believe Fistful of Dollars as well, but they can be very tricky to get here in the U.S., and you usually have to pay quite an exorbitant price for them. This release is, like most of the limited soundtrack boutique labels we have now, it is on the pricey side, admittedly. I always have to pick and choose what I can afford, but, as soon as this was announced, I was like, I've got to check this out. And then, again, I was so impressed with Chris Malone's other work, particularly his work on the Quartet reissue of the Burt Bacharach Casino Royale score from the 1967 film. That CD is absolutely essential, and actually, I believe it's still in print. So seeing that and experiencing that, and then knowing he was going to get to tackle The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, it was just like the press release just knocked me for a loop. Again, it is a bit on the pricey side, and there are only certain distributors you can order it from in the U.S., which I will link to in the description. Quartet is a European label, so again, they're not as available as some of the other labels here in the States, but this is well worth every single penny. It is in a multi-tiered, I never know what to call these, jewel case, which is common for multiple disc releases on CD. What's lovely about this is they do a really great job on the packaging. Each disc has a wonderful label with each, representing the iconic three characters. And then what I also loved was the touch of what's inside under the disc. So when you take disc 1 out, you get a nice shot from the Italian poster. And here is disc 2 with the bad Angelized Sentenza, and of course disc 3 is Tuco. The inside of the second tray has a shot from the bridge battle scene, and then the booklet, which is actually quite extensive and has a wonderful essay in it and lots of great stills. It has the center portion of the image from, I believe this was the French poster if I'm remembering correctly, with absolutely beautiful renderings of the characters. And then the imagery continues on into the booklet itself. The essay is excellent, and what was really surprising is that it features brand new input from Clint Eastwood, who was interviewed for it, which I had no idea until I started reading the booklet. That was really impressive because he doesn't talk about the Leone films all the time. It was something of a coup to get him to participate in the extras on the original MGM DVD releases. But that was really nice that they went to that effort and were able to secure a small interview and sort of mixed in like anecdotes through the essay. Again, really nice extensive essay that does go into Morricone's compositional style and the recording of the actual score itself. And my favorite touch is that they use a number of the on-set stills that are the more candid shots in black and white. And then lastly, there is a full-on write-up by Chris Malone about the score, the restoration, the sources utilized, and, why some is mono, and most is mono and some is stereo, and talking about even the restorations they made to the 1967 soundtrack master, because that stuff was on the soundtrack master. It was just apparently cut out of the original LP release and stayed that way through most of the CD runs. And then another of my favorites there, the still of the trio at a very large-looking dinner with Leone, just a nice candid shot. So just to read the text specs really quick, because I want to make sure and get this exactly right. Malone goes on to write, obviously, again, as I said, discs 1 and 2 are the complete original score plus alternate and bonus tracks. It is all in mono because that was the monaural original tapes discovered. That's what's held apparently by MGM, who of course took over the UA library. I presume they were in the States. It might have been from Italy as well. I don't know where they were located from or sourced from. And then disc 3 being the soundtrack master. Again, to make sure I get this exactly right. So disc 3 of the original 1967 soundtrack assembly was remastered from the first generation quarter-inch master tape, which again allows several seconds to be restored to a few tracks that were unfortunately trimmed or cut down or just accidentally missed, perhaps, on the original LP release. And of course, again, with the LP version, it is important to preserve because it is in full stereo and it does feature some different performances, and it is generally thought to have been a separate recording session. But again, there is a lot of debate back and forth among soundtrack fans, but it is an important thing to preserve and to have. And I love that this entire essay is simply entitled, 3 CDs is a lot of music. We're going to have to earn it. And of course, the entire booklet closes out with Chris Malone saying, as is absolutely essential for this, when you have to listen, don't talk. And of course, here is the list of credits for the new release. And the back has, of course, a shot from the final duel. So on the sound side, again, I mean, this, it's incredible. It's hard to put into words hearing this score sound this amazing. It definitely has, you know, that sort of feeling of like several layers have been stripped away. And you may think it wouldn't sound all that great because it's mono and it's not stereo. When you think of Morricone's score for this film and the iconic themes, you know, you think full-blooded. And of course, on disc, we're used to hearing the stereo soundtrack master. But it's really amazing. I have never heard this score sound better. I do think it's a beautiful full-bodied mono, and there are times where you can actually hear the actual orchestra members, like when I always forget the term for it, but when you hear people on wind instruments actually moving their mouth on the mouthpiece, or you can sometimes maybe hear like a slight tinge of an intake of breath, which is really amazing to hear on a recording that's, you know, this old and has never been released at this level of quality before. So don't let the mono fool you. It is, again, I've never heard this score sound this good. I never thought it could sound this good. It's really astonishing, and it is finally complete with some really amazing bonus alternates. Again, some of this stuff was on the Capitol extended disc, and some of it was on the GDM disc, but neither of them went to this level of effort or, you know, getting every track as perfected as possible and in this level of clarity. So I'm stunned. I can't recommend this highly enough. I don't see how this could ever be improved upon. I think the only way it would be perhaps if maybe somehow some stereo tapes showed up. But again, everything seems to indicate that it was entirely done in mono for the recording session. But that's the only thing I can come up with that might improve this release somehow. The dynamic range is fully intact, and because it is mono and from the 60s, it's not, you know, hitting super high on the dynamic range scale when you measure the actual dynamic range using the dynamic range meter. So on average, this is hitting about an 11 on the DR scale, you know, the one that goes from about 0 to 20 if you've ever used the dynamic range meter. Earlier releases and that Capitol one, for example, do have some loudness compression built in, so it's wonderful to hear some of these other tracks without that and without the issues of that release. So that's not a factor either. So the only potential downsides that a purchaser would be looking at is, of course, it is limited. I can't remember how many copies. I think it may be 5,000 copies, but I could be wrong. Most boutique soundtrack releases are unfortunately limited, and then once they sell out, they just go astronomical on the used market. So it is wiser to try and go ahead and buy boutique soundtrack releases sooner rather than later. That, and of course, the price tag is, you know, definitely a bit up there, especially compared to, you know, standard studio label soundtrack releases. But you are essentially getting, you know, tons of hard work, extensive research put into locating the best elements and trying to finally nail down a definitive release of Morricone's work. And I really do think they did it. They deserve so much applause. Again, anything that Chris Malone seems to work on is just astounding. Again, I was first blown away by his work on the Casino Royale 50th anniversary CD, so this was no surprise. So I really do want to start getting more Quartet releases, but being a cinephile on a budget, it is kind of harder to be able to afford as many of these boutique soundtrack releases as I would like to. And again, Quartet being a European label, you do have to special order from specialty soundtrack sites. But this one in particular, there's nothing else quite like this. Nothing else matches that I've ever come across. I wanted to get the GDM disc for years, but again, it was just so pricey and seemed to go out of print pretty quickly. And that was not fully complete and had some different edits of its own. And you get the bonus if you are a big fan of the soundtrack release version in stereo. You get that fully restored on here on disc 3 and actually more complete because it does have those missing seconds of music restored. And I do have the original stereo LP here. This is the US United Artists stereo LP release from 1967. I finally found this in pretty good shape. It is very difficult to find Morricone's scores on LP and not have them destroyed. This does sound wonderful. If you're a fan of the soundtrack version of of Morricone's score for this film, but again, they so nailed even the soundtrack version that it really does outdo the original LP, which itself is great and sounds better than that Capitol extended CD. But so yeah, this is an example where they even got the original soundtrack version right. And again, they were mastering from the original tape source and were able to restore those missing few seconds of music that are trimmed off on here. So while I have done a very extensive review on the Kino 4K release of the film, and I advise all fans to go ahead and check it out, with the Quartet release of the score, this is one of those where it gets my wholehearted recommendation. And if you are any fan of Leone or Morricone or the film or its score, you simply must check this out for yourself. And again, it's advisable to try it sooner rather than later, rather than run the risk of this going out of print. And again, it is pricey, but you are getting 3 CDs of material here. The first 2 discs are fully loaded, and the overall runtime of all 3 CDs is clocking in at right about almost 3 hours. So you're getting nearly 3 hours of Morricone gold and literally every scrap of music that is known to exist, and it has never been presented in this level of quality before. So my major hope is that Quartet and Chris Malone can do the same for the other scores of Leone's work, which particularly several really need the help. And of course, I am referring to Fistful of Dollars, which is a much shorter score, but still does not have a beautiful, fully restored release that is, 100% complete. This is the original US RCA stereo LP. There is, this same album on CD, and again, I believe it was GDM who did do a nice CD reissue in Europe, which I haven't got to pick up yet, that I would like to. But I still think that could be maybe improved upon, and it would be great to see Quartet tackle Fistful. But I must admit, this being a particular favorite film of mine, and it not having a decent score release anywhere in the known world, I hope and pray they tackle for a few dollars more first. Again, there is no good release of this score anywhere. There is no complete version, let alone really any version. All of them are either excerpts or shoved in on other releases. This is the original US stereo LP from the 60s on the UA label, but unfortunately is not really the score. It's a compilation album and re-recordings. So even on the original release, we didn't get Morricone's score. And again, the best you can do is tracking down some foreign versions, usually that have a few tracks and they don't sound all that great, and they're usually mixed in with other tracks of other releases. So this is the one myself and a lot of others really hope Quartet gets to tackle next, because it's the one that needs it the most, because there really is no decent release of this film's score, which again is another Morricone masterwork. And of course, it would be amazing to see them tackle Once Upon a Time in the West in the same manner and making a truly definitive score as they did with GBU just now. Of course, there is the extended GDM release of the score, which is the best version available to date. But again, that is not, I don't think it's 100% complete, and it is obviously in Italian and doesn't have an easy method to get it here in the US. And also, I do think that is out of print as well. It's kind of hard to tell on those because they seem to go in and out of print and are, very expensive on the used market here in the U.S. This is the original US LP on the RCA label, which didn't come out until a couple years after the film's release, and is a very short presentation. And this is on Dynaflex vinyl. Dynaflex is hit or miss. Everybody complains about it being super floppy, but this pressing in particular is ultra noisy. I only picked it up because I found it for cheap, and I've never found a cheap copy since. But this is another score that I would, and I'm sure all other fans are just, waiting with bated breath to see if Quartet can tackle it and do a definitive release as they have done with GBU. And of course, the same goes for Duck You Sucker, which I don't have the original LP of. There are some extended versions of that, but again, no definitive release. And it'd be just as amazing to see them tackle Morricone's score for Once Upon a Time in America, because again, this release of GBU is so astounding and impressive. You really need no other release of this score. If you have other versions, you really don't have to hang on to them unless you have sentimental attachments, or you're like me and I'm going to hang on to the LP, but everything else is going. This thing is astonishing. This is a must-own. This is one of the best soundtrack reissues I've ever come across. It is worth every penny. It's the only problem is it took 55 years to get a definitive release of Morricone's iconic score for this film. So it's definitely worth the wait. But there's no way I can really see this being improved on ever. It is astonishing. So please do check this out if this has been at all interesting to you, or you're a fan of Morricone or the film in general. It is dedicated to Morricone, who of course passed away, and I don't know if he got to see any version of this like as a test disc before his passing, but I'm sure he would have been beyond thrilled at this comprehensive, complete restoration of one of his most iconic works. So this is the 2020 3-CD Quartet Records restoration and complete version of Morricone's score for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Again, one of the best soundtrack reissues, one of the best soundtrack issues I've ever come across, and a dream release for Leone fans and Morricone fans. Again, I can't throw more superlatives at this. This is a must-own disc. It will really bowl you over with its sound quality. It really will. Again, it's like hearing a lot of this music for the first time. And some of this stuff you will probably be coming to for the first time when you're listening to the alternate tracks and the unused materials. And again, it's really cool to try and think where that would have been spotted in the film and how it would have played in those scenes when you're looking at some of the alternate takes and such. So I will close with saying great thanks and congratulations to the team at Quartet Records and Chris Malone. You guys have nailed this. It's just astonishing. This is a dream disc. This is a dream release, and let's hope and pray and keep fingers crossed that we can get the other Morricone scores for Leone classics with this level of quality on disc from Quartet in the near future. So fingers remain crossed. With that, please definitely comment below if you've already gotten this release, you're interested in it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Again, I know it is a bit pricey, but it is well worth it, and I will post links to the major retailers that are carrying this so you can look at it and try to find the best price for yourself. So as always, thank you so very much for watching, and please do without haste check out the Quartet Records release of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly score.